Hopefully you managed to complete the previous task, but just a quick reminder of what's there. We had the pre-made login screen, a form that students would log in and see in an admin form. We didn't really do anything much on the task other than let these buttons function properly. So if you log in, we see the username being displayed on the label. We have an unfunctioning button still on the student screen. If we log in as an admin, obviously with no password, we get taken to the admin page. Again, unfunctioning button, exit button to dispose of a frame, and then an exit button to exit the full program, the full application. What I want to look at now is getting the application to speak to a database. So we're going to be working on the login form. In particular, we've got to be looking at the source. Now, what we need to be looking at is, first off, is the database on PHP MyAdmin. So I have a few that I've experimented with, and if we look at my database here, really quickly set up, I have username stored, which is the primary key for all the entries in this table, forename stored, surname stored, and then really poorly stored passwords as well, just for quickness. Then I have the grades for students, again, just really quickly, so that I've got some data to manipulate, the username of the student who completed the test, the name of that particular exam. Now these are a compound primary key, a grade, so that we can validate some information as input, and then an area from the course, just again, just to store more data. Just pretty meaningless at the moment. So what we need to start off by doing is setting up the MySQL tables. It's very straightforward. If you want to add in new people, you need to spend some time setting this up. You can really easily set new details and insert them in to your database, and seeing the new entries you've added, which is basically the same query that you would use when it comes to adding new users. So it's very easy to add them on here, and it can get you the SQL code too. So what do we need to do first? Well, the first thing when we are setting up connections, and you'll need to find this online, is adding in the MySQL connector, and you'll need to download that online. And if you right click on libraries, add jar folder, and then browse to wherever you've got that MySQL connector, which you can easily find online, it will set that up and add that in for you. Now that's a necessity to allow you to access all the pre-written code that allows us to actually speak to databases. To make our life a little easier, I'm going to create another separate class to deal with the connection to the database, and I'm just going to call that DB connection, and it should load that in for us and do some of the default parts. Now I need to do some imports here for the SQL we're going to be using later, so I need a connection. I will need the driver manager, so SQL.driver manager. You can add these in whenever I get errors. I possibly will miss something. Java.sql.SQL exception, so we can deal with any problems. And option pane, which I'm going to use from Swing to pop up any notifications. You can also use it for debugging as well. So what do we want? Well, we want something that's runnable. We want something that's runnable, that's going to return a connection. So the usual, which returns a connection. Call the function actually to get connection. Set up a null connection. Now this is where you will need to know what you've set up your MySQL as. So we need to use the driver manager to get a connection. We need to provide the URL for it, so should have copy pasted mine. MySQL, it is at localhost, and I called the overall database usernames, so I want to connect to that, so that's why we have usernames there. My admin username is root, and my really secure password is root. So we'll try that connection. Hopefully it works and is returned. We want to catch any exceptions. And this is why I've used in J option pane, so we can pop up if we have any errors. Error in connecting to database. We'll put warning as the title, and we want the type of this to be a J option pane dot warning. You can obviously use the autocomplete to speed things up. If that's successful, we'll return the connection. And that basically will just set up the connection to the database that you've set up using the root user login credentials, assuming you've not made any problems with that and you've also got MySQL running. So that will allow us to connect just like logging in. And in the login formula, we can start to add the parts that we require to actually log in. So the last time we were getting the username. So let's get now string the password that the user's typed in. Now that's in a text field called jPassword field 1, I believe. So when we are accessing that and getting that, we will need to use string value of and then pass into it the jPassword field 1. Yeah, that's correct. Get whatever the password is that's been entered. Now, if you're ever unsure what you've called your labels, etc., just come back to the design, right click and choose properties, and you can see the name there is jPassword field 1. So that will allow us to see whatever password's been typed in and use that to query the database. So in here, I'm going to use the code we created earlier to set up a connection to our database. Yeah, so db connection .get connection. Just for readability, we've added that into the other areas. So we're getting an error because we will need to import our Java connection. So let's just copy that code. Hopefully that takes away our error. There we go. And we'll probably need to do the same for the SQL queries. There might be some additional ones we don't need there. So what do we want to do now? Well, we want to query the database that we've now connected to. So we can create a new string, which is going to be our query. You can find some really good tutorials online for the syntax and so on for SQL language. Right now, I just want to select everything from the users table. If you look at that, I've got the users table right here, which will just return absolutely everything with no nothing filtered out really. Now we're going to have to move this part in a second, so we'll work on it in a second. So we want to try, now what we want to do is create a prepared statement, which I'll just call PS for short, and set up a prepared statement with that connection, which is going to be this query that we've created earlier, which allows us to actually run the query. And we'll fix those errors in a second. Now what a query returns is a result set, which will store in RS, and we tell it to execute that query and store the result set in RS, a variable for this. Now we can then iterate through the result set and display the information we've got. So while the result set dot next to check that it's still actually got something, we can just use the system out, so system.out.println, and I will just print out rs.getString. I need to check my field name, so I've got forename, surname, password. So if we want to print out each of the forenames in turn, print forename, and then we can print out the surname with the same idea, get string surname, which is related to the fields we want to display, and let's just print out their username, so rs.getString username, again related to the field. Same with the prior try, we've got to catch any exceptions, and do something. So to save a bit of time, I'll go back and get the previous one that I wrote and just change it a little. Error encrypted into database, warning. So again, similar, that it checks and tries to do that connection. After that, we'll need to look at when to do this code. Now you can see that we've got some errors, so we will need to do the imports with our prepared statement. So import java.sql.prepared statement and import java.sql.resultSet. Should take care of those, hopefully. See what I've got wrong here. Prepared statement. See, prepare statement it should be. To get rid of that one, and then it should be print line for this one. Okay, no errors hopefully this time when we run. Again, at this point it doesn't actually matter what we type in here. The login button just connects to the database. You can see that whatever you type in as the username is thrown up there, but what it does do is it returns all of the information that it's found in the database, and just prints that out on the console there. Other things that you could do is research the code that would allow you to only display the username and password of someone you've typed in. You could check if the password's correct and output that information, which we'll cover in the next video. Now this one's only really been about setting up a connection and running a very simple query to your databases, so it would be a really good idea to practice that and make sure you get all this part working. There's a lot to do in terms of setting up the SQL databases you want at this point.